Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Please. Amen.
Marketers, the major oil marketers of Nigeria. And you know what that means when we say oil marketers. And you know their significance and importance in this environment, in our society, especially now with what is happening with the deregulation policy of this government. The effectiveness of it and the impact that it has or is going to have on every one of us. So today, following the subsidy removal and the deft management of the fallout by Mr. President, the marketers, oil marketers, paid the president a courtesy visit this afternoon and expressed solidarity with the president on this very proficient policy of subsidy removal, the efficiency of it and the management of it, and more importantly, the promise of Mr. President to look into the alleviation of the impact of this policy on the poorest of the poor in the society. So I will now hand you over to the association, the Oil Marketers Association, led by the governor of Ogun State, who was the chairman of this association, and by virtue of his being a member, or was a member, we can't say he's a member anymore, was a member, a very prominent one. He has graciously led the association to Mr. President.
I want to thank Mr. Laki for that brief introduction. I'm sure most of you are wondering what is the governor of Ogun State doing with the major marketers and the depot and petroleum marketers association of Nigeria. Well, like Mr. Laki said, I was the chairman of the marketers for several years, and that was the position I held until I became governor of Ogun State. And my role today was to facilitate the meeting between the marketers and Mr. President, because at the same time I was also the chairman of the National Economic Council Subcommittee on Oil and Gas. So that was the reason why Mr. President had discussed with me on interfacing with marketers, and I, of course, promptly volunteered to facilitate this meeting. Again, I want to publicly also join others in appreciating our President Bola Tinubu, GCFR, the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Nigeria, for the very bold and decisive decision to remove the subsidy on premium meteor spirit that we call petrol. This decision he took on his first day in office. I believe that that on its own was a very clear indication of his leadership, of his determination to rid Nigeria of this massive elephant that been a problem, that had caused us to hemorrhage for several years. A problem that preceding governments had contemplated but were unable to tackle. This problem, we all know, has become a 4 trillion naira per annum problem, to the point where we were becoming big brothers to our neighbors by subsidizing all the countries along, the West, the West African sub-region. So of course, we know that there will be associated issues. Like they say, there's no gain without some pain. The marketers have come today to solidarize with Mr. President, and the chairman of the marketers will share with you some of the details that ensued in the course of that meeting. But permit me to just say that for us as governors, we see this as a step in the right direction. We definitely solidarize with Mr. President. We stand by him in this policy. Since July of last year, when NNPC became a corporate organization, they have not put a penny into the Federation account. In fact, they were threatening that Federation will soon begin to write checks to NNPC. So this has affected states adversely. And we are confident that once this 4 trillion naira per annum burden is, out of the window, it would enhance, our faculty allocations as different states. And because of that, I'm sure you've all have seen what different states have begun to do in partnership and in support of this policy. Some states have reduced the number of days workers are coming to work from 3 to 4 days. Others have introduced different interventions. We want to call it interventions, not palliatives, because that word has been abused. But the truth is that those are immediate term and stopgap interventions. Some of us are looking at enhancement of minimum wage. Mr. President has announced today that NEC should immediately begin to sit, led by His Excellency the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, and the committee of NEC alongside with the economic team and marketers should sit down and come up with a wholesome approach that would be beneficial to the common man and generality of Nigerians. But in completeness, like I said, whatever it is we do today, be it a minimum wage increase, be it transport allowance, be it provision of any form of intervention, are only stopgaps. What we need to look at that will be sustainable will be, we need to begin to look at an energy transition, for the whole country, where we haven't appreciated the fact that we can no longer power our vehicles with either diesel at the prices or with petrol. We need to begin to look at what obtains in other countries, like Egypt, that's right here on the continent, where they have converted all their mass transit to run on CNG. In some other countries, their vehicles are running on either CNG or running on electricity. So these would be what would be sustainable, that would allow us to transport people, goods and services at prices that are reasonable. So that is the kind of thing that we're looking at, the kind of discussion that we are having with the President, and the kind of approach that this administration is looking at in terms of sustainability. On that note, I will hand over the microphone to Mrs. Akpani to share with you the details of their discussion with Mr. President this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Governor Dapo Abiodun of Ogun State. I thank you all for your patience this afternoon. He has touched on most of the issues, really. But I just want to add that, most importantly, this was a courtesy visit. It was a visit to express our utmost support and solidarity with the government. That is born out of the fact that we have desired, we have ached, we have prayed for this day to come. And we're happy that the day is finally here. We know the difficulties this move has created for the populace. We know what the reactions have been. And one thing we have vowed is that we're going to help the government to disseminate the right information on what this is all about. It's not simply about making transportation more expensive. It's not simply about making fuel so expensive, and it's suddenly out of the reach of the ordinary person, so to say. It's about repositioning this country. I think Nigeria has suffered for too long. It's about putting your money in the right place. We spent maybe 4 trillion last year. He said 4 trillion this year. No, for the first 3-4 months already, we're at about 2.7 trillion in subsidy. By the end of this year, we would have been at about 6.7 trillion. How much of that really goes to the populace? We have been feeding the whole West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa with fuel. Since last week, Monday, and it's difficult to believe that it's only 10 days that this happened. If you check, all those neighboring countries have all their prices shot up. Probably maybe Niger is the cheapest one with about 580 per liter because they were all feeding on Nigerian fuel. But that's not to say that because others are benefiting, they're benefiting wrongly. Nigeria cannot be subsidizing the whole of Africa when we have a lot of our own problems. So we came today to express our support and to see how we can cooperate with government, because ultimately, you can't kill the people you are trying to save. So we're not going to sit back and say, hey, yes, you have removed subsidies, so it's fine. There are aches, there are pains. What can we all do? There are suggestions we have made today on how we can really move this forward. And one thing that came out is that over time, we have all depended on PMS because it was cheap. We didn't develop our gas. There's electricity. So we have alternate sources of energy. It doesn't have to be PMS. Now suddenly, we now realize that, look, we have gas in abundance. There was no fresh investment. Nobody is going to invest in an economy that is not free. You are going to have restrictions. Since maybe July last year, I don't think NNPC has paid anything to the Federation account. As a matter of fact, they were actually going to start billing the Federation because they were spending more on subsidy than they were earning. So these are the problems, and that's why we said it was important for the government to understand that we do support and we are very willing and able to help Nigeria transit this situation. The president did listen to us very graciously, and it was interesting because we all suddenly remember that he's an accountant first and foremost. He asked and he interjected with very, very intelligent questions. And he understood what we meant by saying we want a complete free market. Free market, we want to have one exchange rate so people can stop trading in dollars. If we have free exchange rates, then we can compete in importation, compete in licensing and having refineries running. These are the things we need to get right. We have gone through so many years of no fresh investments. All you ever see are new depots being built. And why is that? Because that's all it takes. If you do that, then you become a marketer and you can begin to sell fuel. But no. And we also try to explain that whereas you were buying 20,000 metric ton parcel for 4 billion naira, today you have to pay 12 billion naira. So it's also important to recognize the fact that the pain is not only for the populace. For the marketers, we're going to see mergers. We're going to see some, unfortunately, will have to drop off because that's a lot of money. How many banks can really fund you? But that's also not to say that we're going to have scarcity. No. Finally, we're going to have our real volumes. We have stopped feeding most of Africa. Already, the volumes have dropped. And it's not only because you're saying we can't afford transportation. It's only the man who has a Jeep that will spend 70,000 naira now to fuel his car. The man who doesn't have a car doesn't have to worry about that. All he needs is transportation. And to that extent, we recognize the fact that we have to have an effective mass transit system. So the people who don't want to be bothered to drive cars have alternative, and they're not going to be stuck at home because they can move. So most of what we talked about is how do we go from here? How can we actually make it work? How can we go back to almost the point where we are before? It's possible. And I say that with all sense of responsibility. And one good thing we also have recognized is the fact that a lot of jobs are going to be created. New businesses are going to come up. There's a adage until sometimes you shut a door, a window doesn't open. And you find out that maybe that window that opens, because of the timing, there's a lot of opportunity that comes through that. So for us, it was a very, very good meeting. And we had an input. We also were able to discuss about helping the economic team, participating in what they're doing. Because we are the people on the field. We are the ones doing this distribution. What can we do differently? And one thing that the president also stated clearly is that we must minimize frictions in this system. We must have a free market that works. Whether it's licensing, if you say you're licensing, how long does it take to license? It has to be done promptly. So in a nutshell, I think that covers essentially what this meeting was all about. And then hopefully the nitty-gritty I don't have to go into at this press conference. But we believe by July, which is only a month away, we're going to begin to really see what is being put in place to help, to assist, and to make sure that people can go back to seamless living. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Well, I touched on that because I said that we're going to participate in the palliative measures that the government is putting together. And to that extent, His Excellency just reminded me that, we did pledge that the whole industry, and I had the MD of NNPC Limited on my left, and we all collectively agreed that we're going to work at providing real mass transit buses that work. The ones that will run on CNG, which is the compressed natural gas and diesel, interchangeably. And hopefully we're going to start with about 50 to 100. And that is in the very, very short term. And these are locally produced. So you see that we're also providing jobs, a lot more jobs, because we're using local assembly plants. We're not importing this. That's less pressure on our foreign exchange, and that's more jobs for our Nigerians. And we think, and the president was very happy with that. And we really, really do thank the president because he had a perfect understanding of a lot of the issues. I guess we were not surprised, but we were almost amazed, to use that word. He asked all the right questions and he pointed to who could solve this problem and that problem. So, like I said, we're really, really grateful that we've had this interaction and we'll take it from there. And hopefully everybody here and Nigerians at large will begin to see that even if this sounded very difficult, it's a very, very good move and very courageous. We've been trying to do this for so many years. No president has had the courage to do this. But now we all have to face it, and like we said, support is what is required now to see this through. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank His Excellency Governor Dapo Abiodun for putting this together in a very short time. And also thank Mr. President for graciously accepting to see us. I think our takeaway from this meeting is that we have a committed president who has a grasp of the problem of Nigeria. He's very, he has sympathy. He's very empathetic about the situation. We have a big problem with subsidy, and he's ready to tackle it headlong. But the most important thing is that the removal of subsidy will unleash the potential of Nigeria. It's going to unleash a lot of resources, that will now be used in education, infrastructure. I mean, we were very surprised. I, in particular, was very surprised with the grasp and understanding that the president had about the industry. He's committed to ensuring that he used the word clog, that he will not accept any clog, that will stop competition and liberalization of the industry. I think Nigeria, in the next few months will be better for it. We want to thank the president, thank Mr. Alaki for also putting this press conference on. On the part of the marketers, we're committed to ensuring that we ensure competitiveness, fair pricing, and also services that the populace will be very happy about. This is a new dawn for Nigeria. Thank you.
So, okay. There's really no need for questions because it's a courtesy call and it's so straightforward. And they have pledged their, cooperation with the government on this policy and its implementation. And there are quite a number of initiatives that they have reeled out to the president in terms of support. So the major item is that they are part of the organized private sector. This is the major oil marketers. They are supporting the deregulation, the full deregulation of the oil sector. And they have pledged their support in implementation of the intervention. The intervention, we don't want to call these things palliatives, but it's intervention. So both the government intervention and their own interventions complementing each other will seriously uplift the masses from whatever envisaged negative impact of that policy. It will act as a cushion to the impact of this policy. So that is it in a nutshell. So there's really no need for questions. Which issue? The issue is they are donating in the first instance between 50 and 100 buses as a whole, not per state. Per state will be going to how many? This is just a gesture, by the marketers to cushion the effect of this thing on, ideally. Yeah, what this is supposed to do is to become a catalyst, to create a bandwagon effect. If the marketers are donating this, then the bankers association or whatever can follow suit. The other sectors, organized private sector, can also take a cue. Before you know it, of course, government is doing its own. Every sector of the economy will become, involved in okay. So the idea is for this to become, create a bandwagon effect for all other sectors. Why did two people change the battery now? Anyway, so that is it. It's not that they have to carry the entire burden on their heads. It's just a gesture, It's to connote the fact that they are involved and they are empathizing with our people in this country, and they demonstrate a support for this policy because it is necessary. This is a 46-year albatross on Nigeria. No government, no president has ever summoned the courage to do this. Whereas everybody knew that it was necessary. So therefore, excuse me, is that therefore, these marketers have recognized the initiative that this government has done and its effect, the ripple effect is going to have on the economy. Not even the military. For those of us who operated under the military, not even the most pernicious dictator in this country had the guts to do what had been done in less than a week in office. So they have come to express their support to the president. And that's it. And to also pledge, their own donation towards alleviating the suffering that is envisaged.
I'm not that I'm not sure that be asking questions as to what didn't happen when. I think we should be looking forward. A bold and audacious decision has been taken. It has been taken at the right time when there's a sense of renewed hope across the entire landscape of Nigeria. Nigerians have keyed into it. You and I know that ordinarily a decision like this would have engendered protest all over the place. But you can see that as tough and as onerous as it is, people are taking it with that sense of optimism and confidence that they have in the administration that they voted into office. Now, these buses are being referred to. They're like 50-seater buses. The buses are probably at the cost of about 100 million naira each. So they are donating 100 buses. That's 10 billion just from the marketers. Because in the past, there's this perceived impression that marketers are opposed to deregulation. I believe by this singular step, they demonstrate the fact that they are keyed into this administration's very laudable policy, and they are in support of deregulation. And like Mr. Laki said, they have trailblazed. They've done this, and I'm sure that others are going to follow. You will see other members of the organized private sector also coming up with such like donations. And like he said, these are meant to offer a cushioning effect. So, like for example, in my state, we also have started the conversion of our mass transit buses to use CNG. By the grace of God, within the next 30 days, we are going to be launching what we call our e-mobility, which allows us to take our petrol-powered Okadas back from the riders and offer them electric motorcycles. So you will begin to see these kind of initiatives across the length and breadth of the country. And at the end of the day, in the medium term, you will see that, the impact that we all feared will not be as exaggerated as we anticipated. Yes, initially there will be a seeming inflation, but this will settle as different interventions. You also, like she said, the gas industry, we were producing CNG. People were not taking it to the point where we were even exporting. There was stranded gas not being taken by consumers. Now you'll see more investments in the gas industry, which will lead to more employment, and of course, cleaner fuel.